Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar where we have a special treat for you today. We have astronaut and explorer Scott Parazynski who will be inspiring us today with a talk about some of his experience and answering some questions. So Scott?
Yes, thank you very much. It's great to be with everyone today. I appreciate you taking the time out to visit with me and hopefully have some interesting things to share with you. Certainly some beautiful photographs. And then if folks have questions along the way, I guess the process is for them to type it in, and then I guess you would alert me, and I'm happy to stop at any point to answer those questions.
Absolutely. There's also, if you would like to raise your hand out loud and ask Scott directly a question, there should be a little yellow hand which will let me know that you have a question, and I will unmute you and you'll be able to speak directly. If you would like to type in your question instead, you can type that into the chat box. Also, if there are any technical problems, you can write the question in there and I'll make sure that I answer that.
Perfect. Okay. Well, great. I guess we have about an hour together, so I'll try and talk fast to make sure that we have time for questions at the end if that's where they reside. But just to begin, this sharp-dressed young man is me at age 5 years old. And this is me standing in front of one of the hangars where they built the rockets that first sent men to the moon back in the late 60s, early 70s. My father worked on the Apollo program when I was very young, so I had model rockets and posters on the wall and ambitions to become the very first man to walk on Mars. But truth be told, I think your generation, the generation of many of the folks on this call, will probably set those very first boot prints down on the red planet. So I think that's really exciting. If you're excited about science and space and exploration, and you work very hard in school, as you've already demonstrated, an aptitude for, we're going to be looking to hire the crews that take those first journeys to Mars in the next 10 or 15 years, right as you're finishing up with all of your training. And I can't think of anything more exciting for human destiny than landing on Mars. And I certainly have no complaints. I had a wonderful 17-year career with NASA. I was selected in 1992 and was very fortunate to very quickly be assigned to a Space Shuttle mission, and I flew in November of 1994. So within a couple of years, I was already getting ready for my first flight. It was an atmospheric science flight, and we took a bunch of very sensitive instruments to the edge of the atmosphere, actually well above the atmosphere, but looking here tangentially, you can actually see through the Earth limb and see some of the cloud patterns that exist there. Our mission was to study the Earth's sunglasses, basically the ozone layer, that could protect our planet from damaging ultraviolet radiation. If we didn't have those sunglasses, plankton growth and plant life would be severely impacted, and of course, we'd have a higher incidence of skin cancers and all sorts of other problems. Our climate would be tremendously different. And so we had a lot of different very sensitive sensors in the payload bay of the Space Shuttle that you can see here. It's a gorgeous view from that vantage point, several hundred miles up. We also took a Christus satellite. This is a big cryogenic telescope that looked over the edge of the atmosphere, in particular over Antarctica. You may have heard of the Antarctic ozone hole. We went up to map that, the extent of the weakening of the ozone layer over Antarctica, and also measure the chemical signatures of new chemicals that had made their way up to the high reaches of the atmosphere that interfere with ozone stability. So we made some really important discoveries using this satellite, and then after 9 days of free flight, we captured it again with this robotic arm and brought it back home for analysis. So the first thing that happens as soon as you land from your first Space Shuttle mission is you want to take a shower, and then you want to get back in line and go fly again. And so I was very fortunate, I was very quickly reassigned to do a long-duration mission to the Russian space station Mir. It's no longer in orbit. It's actually at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. But at the time, it was a really exciting place to go. You had to learn how to speak Russian fluently, and I took that as an exciting challenge. And I went and lived in Star City, Russia for about 5 months. But they ultimately concluded that I was too tall to safely fit in the Soyuz capsule, their lifeboat, if you will, in an emergency. I'm about 6'3", and they concluded that if I were to land in this thing, I might break my neck and/or my knees. So I had to be pulled from that training, but there was a silver lining. I did learn how to speak Russian very well. I had a great adventure, and the flight that I'm going to tell you about in just a moment was very, very exciting. So to replace me, there was a woman by the name of Wendy Lawrence. Turns out there had been an accident aboard the Russian space station Mir. They'd had a collision with a resupply ship called Progress, and they needed to do some emergency spacewalks. And she was too short to safely use the Russian spacesuits. So she got a new nickname. Her name was Too Short Lawrence, and I became Too Tall Parazynski. And this is what we looked like. And we were pretty disappointed, as you might imagine. We had spent a lot of time training for this flight. Both of us were ineligible to go fly up to the Russian space station Mir. But there's a silver lining, as I mentioned, and we were both ultimately assigned to a space shuttle flight to go visit the space station, me to actually do a spacewalk with a Russian colleague. You can see him here. This is Vladimir Titov, and very, very nice guy. What you probably don't know about him, he's very, very famous in astronautics. He was the very first human being to spend a consecutive year off of the planet. So I learned a lot from him. And we did the very first U.S.-Russian spacewalk in history together here aboard the Russian space station Mir. The person that ended up taking Wendy's place, and of course Wendy had taken my place, is here in the lower left. This is Dave Wolf. I don't know if you can see the cursor. I know, Jennifer, if you can just give me an acknowledgement if you can kind of see my cursor, otherwise I'll stop using it. But
I can see it. There's a little bit of a
Great.
time delay on the photos, but the cursor, we can see it. Might have caught up now.
Okay, great, great. So Dave Wolf ended up taking Wendy's spot, and we dropped him off aboard the Russian space station for a 4.5-month visit there. So it was really an incredible opportunity to go live aboard a foreign space station and work with a bunch of international colleagues. To my right here, this is General Jean-Luc Chrétien from France. And over here in the far right, that's Michael Foale. He actually was born in the United Kingdom, in England, but is now an American citizen and a NASA astronaut. So this is what our patch ended up looking like after we had to add Dave's name here on the bottom of the patch. The first time that had ever happened. And we had a beautiful night launch. 7 million pounds of thrust to get off of the planet. Really exciting. By the time you clear the launch tower, you're already going 100 miles an hour. It's a really extraordinary sense of speed and acceleration and vibration. And you kind of roll on your back. And I remember being able to look out the overhead windows of the space shuttle on my first launch and actually see the waves crashing on the beach. And then about 8.5 minutes later, you get to main engine cutoff, or MECO, and all of a sudden everything starts to float around you. You can see the curvature of the Earth ahead of you and the blackness of space overhead and the beautiful pale blue planet beneath you. It's really extraordinary. So this is what a space shuttle looks like up in orbit. Sort of looks like an airplane. Of course, it has a couple of wings and a nose and a tail, but lots of engines and thrusters, and then payload bay doors that open up and expose our radiator panels that cool the avionics in the crew compartment of the shuttle. We have a lot of life support systems that we have to power and keep cool. And in the back of the space shuttle, we had a large laboratory, a double space pad module with about 10,000 pounds worth of logistics and experiments and clothes and food for the space station crew. But it was really fun. We could push off the back wall here and fly like Buzz Lightyear all the way up here to the crew compartment where we spent most of our time. And so that was really fun. When you get up in space, you're kind of like an Olympic gymnast. And you can move around with incredible grace. You can move things with superhuman strength as long as you don't move them too quickly. So it really is a joy to be up there. This is the Russian space station mirror, and I think I mentioned that there had been a collision with a resupply ship. If you can see my cursor now, you can see that this solar array panel has a lot of damage to it. There are holes through it. It's mangled. There's also a big divot in this radiator panel. This is where that resupply ship hit and almost caused the crew to evacuate the space station, abandon ship, and that would have been a really, really bad day. But the crew worked very hard to restore the systems and the power, and we were able to fly to the space station for another 10 years or so. It's not like you can go down to Home Depot and get spare parts. You have to figure out solutions, use the tools and supplies that you have on board to fix things up, and they did all that. Can you hear me now, Jennifer?
Out for a second.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, I can.
Okay, great.
Okay, sorry, my phone was clipped off, but as long as you have me through the computer, then we'll just continue this way.
Great, and it sounds like everyone in the audience can hear you as well.
Excellent. All right, so we get back to the program here. So there is no up, down, left, right, forwards, or backwards in space. It's just whatever way your body is positioned, and it's really kind of cool. You can flip upside down, and the crew compartment looks entirely different when you stand on your head. And it's also really fun to sleep up there. You can put your sleeping bag up on the wall, upside down, or up on the ceiling. Just find a place to Velcro it. You sort of float inside of your sleeping bag, almost like you're floating on top of a pool. Really enjoyable, really, really relaxing. This is Wendy Lawrence and myself inside the Soyuz capsule that would have been my lifeboat had I'd been a long-duration crew member and had there been an emergency. You can see how crunched up my neck is, and definitely too tall to safely fit in this thing, but it's very, very cozy being back there. The ultimate astronaut experience, though, is going outside on a spacewalk, and I was very fortunate to do 7 spacewalks during my career, and also be engaged in a lot of really innovative projects. And I know we have a lot of inventors and innovators through the Conrad Foundation here online today, and the really fun part of my job was working in these unusual environments and trying to figure out ways to do things better, to do them safer, more efficiently, more cost effectively. And those are the same kinds of drivers that we have in technology today. My current job, I'm Chief Technology Officer and Chief Medical Officer at the Methodist Hospital Research Institute. And so the things that I'm trying to do are the very same drivers. Deliver a higher quality of care, invent new medical devices, surgical devices, diagnostics, and informatics that make it easier for our patients and our doctors, streamline processes, reduce pain and suffering, and obviously extend life. And so there's a lot of opportunity in medicine as there is in aerospace. But if you're creative, if you're observant, if you can identify ways to do things better, there can be great rewards. Plus, it's just a lot of fun, as I'm sure you've already discovered. So, but getting back to this photograph, it's one of my favorites. You can see the Earth's atmosphere on edge, and it's just a paper-thin blue horizon. You can also probably appreciate that our spacesuits are a little bit orange tinted. This is an orbital sunrise. We see an orbital sunrise or sunset every 45 minutes. we go around the Earth every 90 minutes, seeing the full curvature of the Earth and the sun come up from behind it. Just really spectacular. And it's really fantastic to be outside on the spacewalk when that happens, because you just have a thin visor between you and the enormity of the universe. One of the things that I got to do on this particular spacewalk was test out a jet backpack. We call it the Simplified Aid for EVA Rescue, or SAFER. And it's just a little addition to the spacesuit here. It's got some jet thrusters on the top here and also down here at the base. And I have a hand controller, kind of like your Nintendo or Xbox controller at home. And if I were to come detached from the space station or space shuttle, I could power this system up and fly myself back to safety. And, so really neat technology as well. The little gas thrusters in the columns of that jet backpack that serve as basically a parachute, if you will, on a really bad day. This is a fun picture too. This is a photograph of me with my gold visor down. Wendy Lawrence took this photograph from inside the shuttle's flight deck here. I have a gold visor down. I'm wearing these gold visors to protect my retina, the back of my eye. If I were to look directly at the sun in this environment, I basically would fry my retina. I would go blind. And so it's very important whenever we're out in direct sunlight that we drop that gold visor. Plus, it makes for a really cool photo. And so you can see up top here, you can see the Mir space station reflected as well as the entire planet beneath you. So it's definitely an office with a view. You get a chance to go out there. Many of you are probably too young to know the name John Glenn, but for me, he was one of my boyhood heroes. He was one of the Mercury 7 astronauts. He became the very first American to orbit the Earth in February of 1962, and ultimately became a United States Senator. He, at one point, even ran for the presidency of the United States. He didn't win, as I'm sure you're aware, but very famous person, but also incredibly humble. And so he came back at age 77 as a United States Senator, as a matter of fact, when he began his training, to fly with us, to help us understand the differences between a young astronaut's adaptation to space and a senior astronaut. Because when you go up into space, it's almost like a period of accelerated aging. We don't have to carry our body weight around, so our muscles and bones atrophy. We don't have to pump against gravity, our heart muscle. So the heart muscle kind of goes on vacation. And there are also some differences in our balance system and our sleep patterns that are really interesting and very analogous to the normal aging process. So it was really an exciting experiment to bring up a 77-year-old astronaut and compare him and his reaction to space with those of his younger crewmates. And as a physician, I was assigned to basically take care of this rock star of space, Senator John Glenn. So I always joke about this now, that if anything had happened to John up in space, I might as well not have come home, because it would have been a really big deal. It would have been tough to face the media after that. But he was in such great shape and did a wonderful job on our mission together. We had 83 different experiments on the flight, very, very complicated integration of all that science, and incredible output of scientific yield on that flight. So here you can see us flying in formation in the mid-deck, the lower part of the space shuttle. Our entire crew, again, a very international crew. This is Chiaki Mukai, and she was a Japanese heart surgeon visiting us from the Japanese Space Agency. And this is Pedro Duque, the very first Spaniard to fly into space. And we had a joke, since he was the very first Spaniard in space, we called him Juan Glenn. So we thought we were pretty clever. But really a spectacular vantage point that you have up in space, seeing your home planet from that vantage point. There's no way to replicate it with photographs or even IMAX movies. You've got to see it for yourselves. And I'm really excited about your futures. By the time you finish your education, there'll be a number of companies that will be taking tourists up to space for short periods of time.
company called Virgin Galactic, and another one called Explore. So you'll be able to spend a few minutes in microgravity. But by the time you finish your schooling, we'll be looking to fly people for longer periods of time, perhaps in space stations or even on lunar colonies. So again, it's a real motivator to work hard in school and definitely to pursue math, science, and engineering, because those are the tools that will really get you there. We're up at about 350 miles above the Earth's surface, very high. You can see the full curvature of the Earth. This is where the Hubble Space Telescope lives, and we had a payload that was about to be launched on the next Hubble servicing flight, and I was responsible for it. There's a cooling system in the very back end of the Space Shuttle, and operated that as well as a solar observing satellite that you can see here. Not only does the Earth have weather, the Sun has weather as well. The corona, which is the outer limb of the Sun, oftentimes will have sunspots as well as these big arms of hot gas, and a lot of radiation will emit from these areas called coronal mass ejections. And that can affect all of our satellite communications and our cell phones and so on. So we really care about it from an industrial perspective, but we also study our sun to understand our place in the universe, to understand stellar physics, astrophysics, and so this is a very exciting, important mission with this satellite called Spartan. And we did a lot of life sciences experiments. As you probably guessed, John has a number of electrodes looking at his heart, how it beats, how the electrical connectivity through the heart muscle. And then check this out. He had to wear this getup a couple of nights during the mission. He has an EEG, electroencephalogram, headnet on to look at his brain waves and track the quality of his sleep and other sensors that monitor his physiology during the flight. And to his right, behind his right hand, that's actually one of our sleep stations. It's about the size of a coffin, pretty tiny. So if you were at all claustrophobic, you would not like doing this. But one of the things that they do is they select prospective astronauts. They actually put you in an isolation chamber a little bit smaller than this and see if you freak out. So they make sure that you're not claustrophobic before you fly. Did a lot of other life science experiments, including some that involved blood draws. So I did all the blood draws on the flight. Senator Glenn really didn't like having his blood drawn. He's a little bit of a scaredy cat, so he called me Dracula. And so I brought up these Halloween fangs with me to scare him a little bit. And we had a lot of fun, some big laughs with that. And I'll just tell you about a couple of other flights, and then I may spend a little time talking about some mountaineering expeditions to the Himalayas and take time for questions. But does anyone have any questions so far? Okay. Can you still hear me, Jennifer?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. I just want to make sure I wasn't talking into the ether, so that's good.
I think we're all just so glued into your presentation. I'm writing down my questions for the end as well.
Good. Yeah. Well, it's a little bit different giving a Skype present or a WebEx conference because you don't have any auditory feedback on whether or not the message is going out. But, so the next two missions that I'll tell you about were both to the International Space Station. And you can see this patch, which was designed by our crew, sort of looks like an EVA helmet. But it also has this robotic arm built into it. This was our mission, to install this Canadian-built robotic arm. We had a Canadian astronaut, Chris Hadfield, an Italian astronaut, Umberto Guidoni here. We also had American astronauts and then Yuri Lonchakov from Russia. So all those flags are kind of built in stylistically into our patch. So I really like this particular one. Here's our crew going up to a very early International Space Station. And Chris and I did the spacewalks to build the arm. We had, here's Umberto and Yuri, Kent Rominger and Jeff Ashby and John Phillips. I'm sorry, I should have introduced my other crewmates earlier on, but great people. Your crewmates become basically extended family when you're training for a mission together, and it's really a lot of fun. And this is what we did up on orbit. We installed this robotic arm, looks like a V, at the bottom of the space station. It's really an amazing piece of technology. Talk about innovation. This arm can grapple onto the outside of the space station at one point and get all of its power and data and video, and then use the other end, its end effector, to grapple onto another spot, kind of like an inchworm, and do the same thing. It can get its power data and video from there and unleash the other side. So it can kind of crawl all over the outside of the space station. We can use it as a cherry picker, move astronauts around to do assembly or maintenance tasks, and then also we can use it to grapple new modules, to do inspection activities and things like that. So really remarkable. And here we are, we're a pretty styling crew here. We wanted to have a special party for our International Space Station hosts. Here in the lower right is Susan Helms and Yuri Usachov was the commander of the space station at the time, and Jim Voss. Those three were living up aboard the International Space Station, and they hadn't seen other human beings in about 2.5 months. So we decided we would have a Hawaiian luau for them. We've got these crazy shirts for them and our crew. We had Don Ho music, Hawaiian music, and other things to go with the theme. But the real work was outside on our 2 spacewalks during this mission to build the robotic arm, and had a chance to do some really complicated rewiring on the outside of the space station. It was very delicate work. Some of these cables were made of what's called fiber optic cable, essentially glass. And if you were at all careless with them, if you bent them too much, they would actually crack and become useless. And this is a $1 billion piece of space hardware that we were installing, so we were very, very delicate with them, and it all went extremely well. I'm actually perched on the end of the shuttle's robotic arm while installing the larger Canadian-built Canadarm 2. Anytime you're outside on a spacewalk, you have a huge grin from ear to ear. It's just an unbelievable human experience. You're very hard at work, but then every once in a while you look up and you see, look, there the Himalayas, or there's the Great Barrier Reef. And so it's really a dream come true. You're in your own personal spaceship, too, which is also another incredible innovation, to be able to take everything that you need to live and work in this incredibly harsh environment. You have to be protected from the vacuum of space. The temperature extremes can be from -200 degrees in the orbital nighttime to 300 degrees above zero in orbital day, so 500 degrees of temperature swing. You need to have oxygen available to you. You need to get rid of carbon dioxide. You need battery power to power your spacesuit systems and your cooling, as well as your radio and your telemetry. For cameras and lights on our helmets, we even have a jet backpack that we can use to fly ourselves back to safety. So it's a really complicated little spaceship made for one. And it's, like I said, the ultimate astronaut experience to get a chance to go out and do that. And the views are just beyond compare. This is a ride that I took on the end of the shuttle's robotic arm that seemed like it went by in about 30 seconds. It just went by in the blink of an eye, even though I think it took about 30 minutes in real life. Here's another sunglasses down, gold visor down photograph. And if you look, this is the U.S. laboratory's window. And this is where Yuri Usachov took this photograph from. You can actually see the shuttle's robotic arm here, and my friend Chris Hadfield out on the end of it reflected in this photograph. Really an amazing shot. And then my last flight was also to the International Space Station. Here's our crew, amazing crew of, oops, looks like it's on auto advance. Our commander was Pam Melroy. She became only the 2nd female to command a space shuttle. And the pilot was George Zamka. Flight engineer was Stephanie Wilson. And then Doug re-elected 3 of the 4 spacewalks with me. Dan Tani did 1 spacewalk with me. And this is Italian astronaut Paolo Nespoli, who did basically the quarterbacking for our spacewalks. He talked us through the procedures and kept us safe. Here we are on an approach to the International Space Station with a module called Harmony. It's advancing, I'm sorry. And this is the first view inside of the Harmony module after we had advanced it. Paolo and Peggy Whitson, who is the International Space Station commander at the time, wore these protective goggles as well as masks. Kind of looked like bank robbers when they went in there, but that was to basically prevent any metal shavings or anything from getting in their eyes or lungs as they took the first look inside. And of course the air was pristine, and they were quickly able to take those off, and we all went inside. But a brand new module for the space station. And the idea was from the space module, we would plug in different laboratories from Europe and Japan after our mission had successfully installed the module as well as relocated this large solar array truss from the top of the space station out to the very tip. And so we did 3 spacewalks on the mission to install the, let me go back here. Sorry about this, it's auto-advancing. But, we did 3 very successful spacewalks, and at the end of the 3rd spacewalk, we had installed this new solar array truss out at the very tip of the space station, and the crew inside commanded these solar wings to extend. And as that was happening, one of the solar panels began to rip apart. And this was a critical situation because it was unsafe for us to even undock the space shuttle. They were concerned that that wing would come off and hit the space shuttle, and as we undocked it from the station, maybe prevent us from coming home safely. So we had to go do something about this, either go out and throw away a $1 billion piece of space hardware or go out and fix it. And NASA did the amazing, in my estimation. They invented in the next 72 hours a new way to get a person out to the very tip of the space station and then install basically a suture. We call this a cuff link. What you see in George's hands here is a piece of wire that's about 5 feet in length. It has 2 metal tabs on either end, covered in insulating tape so that I wouldn't get shocked when I put this in. But the idea was that you'd send a person out to the very tip of the space station, cut out the this frayed guide wire that had caused the damage, and then install these cuff links to allow us to fully extend the solar panel. And it worked beautifully. Very, very difficult work. Robotically, this is Stephanie and Dan flying the robotic arm to get me out there. Very challenging work. And then this is what the solar panel looked like up close and personal. It's gold and shiny and beautiful, but it's also very dangerous. This has 100 volts of energy coursing through it, so I had to be very careful not to touch anything directly with my the metal parts of my suit. All the tools that I worked with had to be specially covered in insulator. A lot of invention went into creating the plan to fix this problem. But it worked beautifully. We were able to put in 5 of these couplings across the width of the solar panel. Here you can see at the end of that spacewalk what it looked like. Really one of the most significant saves in the history of the space program, and a lot of people have reflected back on this as the Space Shuttle, Space Station era's Apollo 13 moment. It was really that kind of an effort with people working around the clock on the ground, mission control and elsewhere to figure out a solution and then get that plan up to the crew so that we could go do it. So it was really an amazing team effort to go to work this. Here's what that robotic arm looked like. It was 90 feet in length. It had never been cobbled together like this before. It was really out at the very tip of the space station. And my friend Doug Wheelock here was really a superstar. He was at the base of the solar array as my spotter, making sure that it was safe for me working around that panel and giving me cues along the way. So great success. And here's the space station over the Himalayas as we feel overhead. So the next little phase of my talk here, I'll try and stop by 1:45 so we have time for a bunch of questions. But The other big venture in my life has been a love of mountains, and also as an inventor and innovator, inventing technologies to take to the mountains to live and work more safely in this environment as well. So I've got a number of innovations around living and working in extreme environments. But this photograph I took on my very first space shuttle flight, and this is looking straight down on the top of the highest mountain in the world. This is the top of Mount Everest right here, 29,035 feet above sea level. And you can see the entire mountain, the climbing routes. The route that I took came up the Khumbu Icefall, the Khumbu Glacier, and then the Khumbu Icefall here, the Western Cone, and then up the what's called the Lhotse Face, Camp 4 here at 26,000 feet, and then up this ridge line to the top of the world. It takes about 2 months to go do that. You don't just fly into Kathmandu and begin your trek and climb. It takes a lot of physical preparation. You have to build, oops, I guess I don't have in this flight that, here we go. You basically have to build additional red blood cells in your circulation to carry the thinning air in this environment. Base camp itself is at 17,500 feet above sea level, so very, very thin air. And so you take many trips up higher and higher on the mountain to get acclimated to the thin atmosphere. And then after you've been on the mountain for about 8 weeks, you are ready to take a stab at going for the summit. And you basically just wait for a weather window to arrive, and you probably have 3 to 4 days to make that round trip from base camp. It's a really beautiful, beautiful place. Well, I guess I don't have the summit photos in this slide deck, but getting a chance to stand on top of the world is a dream come true. It was certainly one of the toughest things I've ever done in my life, both physically and mentally. But I think the things that mean the most to us in life are the ones that are the hardest. And so I hope that you can find exciting challenges in your lives that you want to really put your all towards, and explore, invent, help other people. We certainly need your help, and you guys are, I know, extremely bright and motivated, and the next generations are counting on you. So with that, Jennifer, I will turn the floor back over to you.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. I had myself on mute, but I was definitely laughing throughout the presentation, so I didn't think that everyone wanted to hear that. But don't worry, there was some feedback. You just weren't able to hear it.
Okay, good.
So for anyone who has any questions, please feel free to raise your hand, and then you can ask it out loud to the audience or type it into the question box. I had a quick question first. As we saw on that first slide, it sounds like as a kid you were definitely had your eyes on the sky and had some ideas of what you wanted to do. How about throughout, middle school and high school? Did you have mentors, or what sort of led you to actually get to that point where you were accepted as a NASA astronaut?
Well, I think that's a great theme to tug on, Jennifer. It's so important to not only have dreams, but have the tenacity to make them come true. Anything really significant in life is not going to be handed to you, no matter how much we would like that to happen. If you really want something big in life, you're going to have to work really, really hard for it, and also keep chipping away towards those goals. And so I always kept my ambition to become an explorer in the back of my my mind. And so, the studies that I did, the extracurricular activities, I always thought, well, would this be a good preparation for, one day exploring space, or becoming a doctor, or becoming a climber? I was always interested in participating in exploration, not observing it, or just being a bench scientist or a hospitalist. I wanted to be on the exploration frontier myself. I wanted to go there, see it, touch it. And so yeah, I just kind of kept those aspirations simmering in the back of my mind. And I think if you talk to a lot of astronauts and people who have had really exciting careers, they'll all tell you that they had to work for it. It didn't come easy, and many of them, had been working towards their goals since a very early age. So, if you want to become an entrepreneur, invent the next, the CEO of the next Apple, or whatever it is, hang on to those aspirations and have the strength to work for them.
Great. And I think a lot of our students are already there by just entering our competition and learning how to write a business plan and a technical plan, as well as coming up with an innovative idea. I think that is, they're already on the right track. So hopefully.
I totally agree. I think this is such a wonderful program, and I think it's going to set all of you up for great opportunities later in life, whether or not you become an entrepreneur, or a business person, or an engineer, or a scientist, or astronaut. It's getting you to think about how to approach problems in a creative, methodical way. So.
Great. Okay, so I have a couple other questions coming to you. First, what are your hopes for the future of space exploration?
Well, there are two major ones that I want to tell you about. So the first is I really would like to see this commercial human spaceflight sector grow and thrive. The good part about it is that the leaders in the industry are all American companies, so a lot of people have been very pessimistic about the end of the Space Shuttle program and not having a shuttle to fly American astronauts to space. And I certainly wish that we had kept flying the shuttle until we had the next vehicle available, but that's not in the cards. But thankfully, there are a number of companies that are working diligently to get us to space on American vehicles very soon. So I want to make sure that there are rides for all of you, those of you at least that want to go see space and experience it. Hopefully there'll be a number of different pathways to get there by the time you finish your training. So that's one part. And the ultimate goal, though, I think for the government space program, NASA, is to explore and to push the boundaries now well beyond Earth orbit. So I'd like to see us go back to the moon and ultimately onto Mars, because that's where we're going to have some fundamental questions about the origins of life in our solar system, our universe. It's possible that comets seeded life here on Earth, and it might have actually deposited material even on Mars, or Mars might have at one point had the conditions for life that life could have co-evolved there independently. So to go with human beings with the ability to make real decisions and perform detailed exploration, I think, is the ultimate human destiny. And so I'm hopeful that in your lifetime there'll be bases on Mars exploring all over that planet and potentially going places beyond. There's a planet, or a moon of Jupiter called Europa that has a lot of volcanic activity, so there's a lot of geothermal heat. There's also a lot of frozen ice water, and so there's potential that with a combination of heat and water and ideally carbon sources there, that life could have co-evolved there as well. So at one point in the future, I'm sure we'll send at least robotic probes and maybe even human explorers to go visit Europa. So there are lots of things to do in the future for the space program, both the private sector as well as the government.
Yeah, very exciting. And through our competition in the space exploration category, hopefully, potentially our students could be coming up with the ideas of the future for commercial spaceflight. So if you ever need help with any of your ideas, you can always tap back into our students. I'm sure they would love to speak with you on that. So,
I wonder if we could do that, Jennifer. Do you work with we're a nonprofit institution, but we're focused on medical innovation. I wonder if we could, throw a challenge out there for you guys.
That would be great.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, that is definitely a conversation I would love to have with you. All right, a few other questions. I want to make sure I don't take all the time. So a question from Russell. He wasn't able to make the beginning of the presentation, so he doesn't know if you covered it. What requirements were needed to be an astronaut, and what training did you go through?
Well, the minimum requirements are to be a U.S. citizen, to be able to pass a NASA flight physical, and then have at least a bachelor's degree with 3 years of experience in a field related to the space program. But typically, folks have at least a master's, if not a doctorate, unless you're a military fighter test pilot, and then there's some exceptions, and you don't necessarily need a master's degree or above. But it takes the background in math, science, engineering, medicine, those types of fields, and then typically experience working in teams. So typically we'll hire people that have backgrounds in team sports or worked in operational environments where we know that they work well together under pressure. We like people that have lots of different skill sets, because when you become an astronaut, you wouldn't necessarily do just one role. For example, myself as a physician, I was responsible for many, many things, including spacewalking and robotics and being a flight engineer on the shuttle and various payloads. We all have to wear lots of different hats. So we look for people that are very well rounded. And then I guess the last thing I would suggest is that if you have some skill in language, the space program is very international, so if you have an additional language or two, ideally Russian, that would put you in good stead. And what else can I add to that? A background in aviation, if you've got your private pilot's license, or if you're a scuba diver, those are valuable skills because of the simulations that we do to prepare for flight. But they're not 100% required.
Great. He also says, brilliant presentation. I want to become an astronaut. Would it be possible to email you questions in the future?
I think we can do that. I have a website. It's just my last name, www.parazynski.com, and you can submit questions there. I haven't kept up on that for a while, but I would love to engage with folks there and add more Q&A to that website. So I'd welcome anyone to stop by there and correspond with you. That would be fun.
Okay,
and
great.
Good luck to you.
All right, so another question from Jack and Kathy. You mentioned rocket models with your first slide. How much of an influence were they in your decision to become an astronaut?
Well, I was very influenced by my parents. My dad was an engineer who worked on the Apollo program, so I kind of grew up around the program. Went to Apollo 9 when I was a little kid and saw that launch. So certainly real rockets as well as model rockets were a big influence, and I wanted to be a part of it. So I'd say a real significant role.
Another question, what do you think about the future destinations that NASA has planned? Do you believe we should go to an asteroid first, or might it be better to go to the moon first?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I'm not very excited about going to an asteroid for a couple of reasons. One, I think it's not nearly as interesting as going to the moon. It's not as relevant to preparing to go to Mars. I think if we can learn to live on a planetary body with some gravity, like the moon is, we can then use those same technologies for Mars. Going to an asteroid, is actually technically very challenging because if you know from your physics, Newtonian laws tell you that if you push on something, you're going to have an equal and opposite reaction. So as you bang a geologic hammer on an asteroid, it's going to push you back. And so doing geology on a very lightweight asteroid without gravity is going to be very difficult, and it won't give us the technologies and the know-how to really go explore Mars, which is, as I said before, the ultimate destination. So I'm not all that excited about the mandate right now to go to an asteroid. The other problem that the asteroid mission has is that there isn't really a timeline associated with it. When we went to the moon back in the late 60s, President Kennedy said, we're going to go to the moon in the next decade. It was a very finite goal, and we were bound and determined to make that happen. There's no date associated with going to an asteroid or back to the moon or even to Mars. And the challenge there is if there's no pressure to make it happen, especially in this economy, it'll just get pushed off and off and off. And I hope that doesn't mean that other countries will beat us to the punch, but there's certainly a risk of that.
Okay, I'm going to take a few more questions as I don't want us to go over time or be cut off. First, would you say your experience as an astronaut has helped you in your career as a doctor? If so, how?
A lot. It's a great question. Yes, I think it's really important to leverage all life's lessons along the way towards the things that you're engaged in. And I certainly have learned a lot of things in engineering and science from my 17 years as an astronaut that I can now leverage back on medicine. And it's really exciting. I'm actually able to now use some of the technical approaches and some of the software approaches that we use for rendezvous and docking on medical robotics, for example, and surgical robotics. So I think the technologies have some interesting overlaps, and then also the approaches to safety that we think about in the space program can have some real bearing as you think about doing really invasive procedures on patients. Making sure that you thought through what you're about to go do in a very careful way. You think about all the pitfalls, and in NASA speak, we call it redundancy. We like to have a plan, but then also a backup to the plan if the first one doesn't work out, and if it's really important, a backup to the backup. And that's a really good thing to think about in medicine as well. If you're going to do a really invasive procedure, if something goes wrong, what happens next? And what happens if your fix doesn't work? And so I take that approach with me now that I'm back in medicine, and I look at different technical solutions. I try and make sure that we've thought through the whole story. Good question.
Great. This is a question for me. I was wondering, what sort of findings did John Glenn reveal when you were doing those tests? Or are you still interpreting that data?
It was very interesting to compare his data with the younger astronauts. Of course, it was only an N of one, one sample of an elderly astronaut versus several hundred over the years of the younger population. But what we did learn, John, of course, was a very, very fit 77-year-old, but he did have a latency in his recovery time. So it took him a little bit longer to adjust to microgravity, and it also took him a little bit longer to then readjust to Earth's one gravity. So to get his balance back, to get his bone density back, all the parameters that we were measuring, there's just a little bit of a time lag. But we also discovered that some of the countermeasures that we apply now for our long-duration crew members probably have benefit here on Earth. So some of the things that we're doing to prevent osteoporosis, the thinning of bones in astronauts in space, probably have really good utility here on Earth. And some of the other things, the deconditioning of the heart muscle and balance disorders, some of the countermeasures that we use for astronauts will have some real utility here on planet Earth, and that's a really good thing.
Great, and I have a message from Jack and Kathy saying, we're old enough to remember John Glenn's first launch. Thanks for taking good care of him for us.
Oh, that's nice. That's great.
All right, we have another question from Russell. I know many astronauts had to try multiple times to get into the astronaut corps. How many times did it take you?
I was very, very fortunate, Russell. I was accepted the first time I applied, but I have several friends who knew what they wanted and weren't going to give up. And a friend of mine, Joe Tanner, who I flew with on my first flight, he applied for a decade, for 10 years, and ultimately was selected in 1992 with me. So if it's something you really want, you got to be tenacious about it. Don't give up, and great things can happen. I guess the other corollary I'd say to that is not everything that you aspire to will come true in life, and I certainly have examples of that. Things that I've wanted to do that came close to happening, but not 100%, and that's okay too. Some of the byproducts of the things that you've really worked hard for may not. In my case, I didn't get to compete for the United States in the Olympics, but I did get to go to the Calgary Winter Olympic Games in 1988 as a coach for the Philippines, of all places. So I got to live in the Olympic Village in March in opening ceremonies and do some things that were just extraordinary. And the people that you meet and the experiences that you have, if you're really determined to make your dreams come true, really enrich your life. And so, like I said, whether you want to become an astronaut, save the rainforest, become president, really go for that. If it doesn't exactly come out, I can guarantee you that the byproducts of your hard labor will be worth it.
Well, thank you so much. I think that's a great message to end on, and I'm so sorry if I didn't get to all of your questions. Please feel free to email me, and I'll see what we can do. Or I sent out the www.parazynski.com to your chat boxes, so you should be able to go on there as well. And thank you so much, Scott. I would love to talk to you more about some way that we can combine, because we have health and nutrition category as well as aerospace, and maybe we could find one for next year that would fit in well, which does start at the end of March. We'll launch next year's competition. So
that's great. We're very collaborative. We would love to do that, and also thank all of you for participating today. I really enjoyed it greatly, and I wish you and the Conrad Foundation great success moving ahead.
well, thank you.